Hi, 3DMJers. This is Andrea Valdez, and you are listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. Before we dive into today's episode, just wanted to remind everyone to head over to 3dmusclejourney.com and sign up for our Big 3 newsletter. We call it this because, in case you haven't noticed, our team comes up with 3 new pieces of content every week in the form of 2 articles and 1 podcast episode. Rather than remembering to check back with us 3 times a week, we can send it all to you in one single email every Thursday. This weekly digest also includes direct links to any other content that Team 3DMJ coaches are a part of throughout the entirety of the internet. Whether that's guest appearances, interviews, seminars, or courses, you will not miss any of it. So if you like hearing about all the free resources that we have to offer, all the products we sell, all the projects we are a part of, and all the ways you can get discounts, reminders, and early access to them, head over to 3dmusclejourney.com right now and sign up. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the show. Today, I'm joined by Eric Helms and Alberto Nunez as we talk about traveling while dieting. After spending the first few minutes arguing with one another like siblings about how the hell to start this thing off, we finally find our footing and dive into a more methodical conversation that covers the spectrum of individuals who might find this type of information useful. We go into both the psychological and the tactical strategies that we have found to be effective for ourselves and our athletes over the years in regards to how to handle weekends, vacations, work trips, and any other reason that one might be on the road or in attendance to some special event. While the bulk of this chat is mostly about dietary tools and mindsets, you'll also hear us go into ways of planning and manipulating your training to make the best use of your time and reduce your risk of injury as well. So like our last couple of episodes, this topic was actually brought to our attention by an audience member's request. So please don't be shy. Feel free to let us know what you're thinking and what you're liking throughout the internet. YouTube and Instagram are the most effective ways to get a hold of us, but all things will work on the Twitters, on the Facebooks, whatever you want. And lastly, as always, if you have any feedback or comments on this specific episode, you can leave them for us at 3dmusclejourney.com under podcast number 44. So here we go. This is Traveling While Dieting with Eric Helms and Alberto Nunez. Bert, your chest looks great.
Thank you. It's chalky today. It's a little ashy.
For the listeners, Bert just came back from the gym and front squatting, and
got that ashy chest.
I was actually late to this recording. I thought I was off the hook this Friday, yeah. But I got PR, so it don't matter.
It don't matter. Tell everyone about your PR though.
I did good on the squat. And then the overhead press, no one cares about the overhead press. It's like second, it's worse than the bench press.
What do you mean nobody cares about it?
No one cares, dude. Yeah.
Is that because you're not good at
it? Yeah, it's exactly why.
So today, I think Brad put it in there in our bank of podcast questions. So it's probably from YouTube or Instagram, someone asking some tips, tricks, advice on how to travel during prep or during a dieting phase and like not screwing that up. So I'm gonna open with, right, regardless of whether you're dieting or not, learning to be flexible is pretty important. How would you say someone's never... Are we assuming they know how to count their macros? What do you think, Eric? They already know how to do that?
Before we get into probably the details, I think we should probably just start with the mindset of traveling or vacation. I think some people, they really look at it as the goal is to have a food vacation sometimes, or at least that's a big component of it, to where they eat out for every meal, and they really try to experience or they focus on the cuisine side of the experience. And I think some of that's obviously fine, but I think probably a good mindset shift, especially if you're dieting, is to focus on the experience of seeing the area, doing activities, and whatever you're doing, or spending time with the people you're traveling to see. So that, then things like your first stop is not just to a restaurant, it's to a grocery store, and you make sure you get a hotel room with a kitchen and a refrigerator. Like that stuff is critical so that you don't put yourself in a position where you really can't succeed if you eat it out at a restaurant every single meal.
Yeah, but we're also within that, like all those things you mentioned are super important for a competitor, like you said, but is that where we want to go for this conversation? When we say dieting, fat loss, they know how to count their macros. Like I'm just trying to establish, because there's a lot of people, like for example, when we go to like say London, we didn't put everything on hold to make sure that we were stocked up with everything we needed. You know what I mean? Like we ate out a lot. But
I wasn't dieting.
That's what I'm saying. So we are assuming that someone is a person who knows how to track their nutrition, someone who has the goals of being in a deficit throughout this, right? I know that's exactly what the question said.
If we, so yeah, so we're dealing with someone dieting on vacation, right?
Yeah, but I think prep dieting is different than someone who like wants to lose.
I think maybe
help me with this.
When I think of the demographic that struggles with this, it's the people who are very on or off with their switches.
Okay.
And they don't know how to compromise. And I think that's just usually going to be the case. Even if you have everything lined up and I have a decent system at this point when I'm not at home. But even then, quite often, I find myself having to compromise and being okay with not being 100%. During the time spent away from home. So I think that's a demographic we're speaking to, whether they're cutting, whether they're bulking. It's that group that, can take their 80% for the week and be content with that.
Right. But if they're prepping, that's not okay. That's what I'm saying. You know what I mean? Like if they're at the last half of prep, it'd be more okay for you than it would be for a small girl like me. Like I need the vegetables and the produce because I say have 60 grams carbs today kind of thing. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, I mean, there's that to consider. There's also...
We can approach it from the different situations. We just have to do it in kind of like the chunks of those situations. So we could start with, you don't really know shit about dieting. You're in the middle of trying to lose 100 pounds and you have a vacation to take. Then we could also do the typical 21-year-old who wants to get abs and you're cutting while you're on vacation. And then we can also do contest prep while dieting. And I think all three of those will have pretty different answers that should cover the whole spectrum.
Okay, perfect. So let's do that. Let's start with, I want to not have crappy food habits. I have 100 pounds to lose, like you said. And we have to at least consider, too, that if they're in that place where they need to lose 100 pounds, then it's like a relationship, emotional probably thing, not so much like my body's hungry. Whereas that's what we'll talk about later, right?
Sure, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say in that situation it is about lifestyle change for the most part, not how do I manage a specific tactical situation like contest prep. And part of lifestyle is, vacations should be a part of life, hopefully, once you get to a position where, you have the financial means to do so and the ability to do that. And that is a different set of skills because everyone, there's a couple key things which screw everybody up, like holidays, vacations, weddings. Those are typically where you look up and you've erased a couple weeks of progress. So just like your lifestyle needs to change in a more general day-to-day sense, the way you do all things has to have some behavior modification as well. And I think one of them is that philosophical outlook of this isn't me experiencing the cuisine of the place I'm going to as the primary goal. It's let's focus on the time spent with my friends. Let's focus on exploring the area, getting the feel of being a tourist in this place. And then food takes not necessarily a backseat completely, but it comes down from the top of the list.
Yeah.
So you can plan around that.
Did we record this?
Yeah, we're recording. We've been.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm like, that is like freaking awesome. That should be on the podcast.
Make sure you're recording this.
Well, yeah, and I think too, there's the whole like putting things on a pedestal. It almost like you said, undoing 2 weeks of progress, right? And it's not just a vacation thing. Like that's really common with like an every weekend thing. And people that have this 100 pounds to lose kind of thing, it tends to be that they want so bad to fix it Monday through Friday that their body's in a state where it's like the weekend has its pedestal, and then you go to, like you said, a holiday or a vacation. It's like this big release, right? And one of the common errors we see, I think even in our athletes, much less someone who has to lose 100 pounds, is like pre-dieting before these occasions, which makes them like that much worse, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I mean, I can't tell you how many times people want to diet for a vacation, and then the diet for the vacation is the reason why they binge on the vacation.
Yeah.
I honestly, I feel like I run into that all the time with people. Like, I want to diet for my wedding, and I'm like, your honeymoon's not going to be focused on your wife. It's going to be focused on eating. Don't do that, you know? Or if you do it, you need to finish it long before the vacation, and then, you know, normalize first. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. Doing it, like that it's not bad to do it, but if you do it right up until that day. I never thought about that, like doing it 6 months before kind of thing. Cool.
Yeah. Like, I don't know about you guys, but with my competitors, and this is a minor tangent, I almost always advise them against taking a vacation post-show.
Yeah.
Because it really means they're starting off in a bad place, typically.
Yeah. That's hard to do. Like, it's hard because you want to do the social things you couldn't do before. Or a lot of times, right, people have a show that's out of town, so they're like, I'm already out of town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
they're
not social.
Not social. Yeah.
Exactly. They're like the cat that stole some of the chicken off the plate and is growling at everyone in the corner, like eating it, you know. And you're like, so Tom, you got any room to talk between bites? No, quiet. Pizza, haven't had. You know, like.
Yeah.
How are the people in New York? I don't know, but the pizza's fantastic, right?
Yeah. Exactly. So another thing, if we're talking with people, let's finish it off with like that, like you said, a philosophical approach to what vacation is. One, we talked about, is your normal life just in between vacations, you know, dieting for the one day, whether that's every Saturday night when you go out with your friends or whatever. Another thing too would be that, like, I feel like a lot of people have, like, anxiety like a month before this trip happens, right? Like, mine's a different anxiety. Mine's just stress because it's usually for work. But a lot of my athletes or people off season on my Skypes that have faraway things are already asking me, like, well, what is my training going to look like, and what is my food going to look like? And it's weird to me that I find that those people worried about it that far in advance tend to come back in a worse spot. I don't know how to address that, but have y'all had that experience too? Like, it's almost like food's a bigger part of their life anyways.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Berto.
You know, I think when I think of vacation now, certain vacations, what comes to mind is I get to do a lot of the things that I want to do. And so much of this, like, bodybuilding thing that I do, like the eating protein numerous times a day, getting a training session, it's what I love to do. And sometimes I feel that when I do plan like a weekend getaway, I'm able to do that a little better because I'm away from, you know, all the stuff that typically happens in my, I guess, more, for the lack of a better term, my Monday through Friday life. Mm-hmm. So I think that's, when I think of like vacation, like I think of just being able to do the things, that I love to do in a less stressful environment. And that helps tremendously. And sometimes when, you know, people talk about the food that they want to eat, you know, there's this restaurant, they have this burger challenge. I'm like, do you not love what you do? Because I really love what I do. And I don't ever really feel like there's a point in time where I have to rebel against like this system, because I don't feel trapped. The way I've designed my life, it's like this because I like to do it. I love to eat. I love to eat like a bodybuilder. I love to train. So I think that's something that people have to ask themselves. It's like, dude, maybe are you handling, just in general, and like vacation sometimes makes that obvious. Are you probably trying to juggle more things than you should at this point in time in your training?
That's a really good point. Like the more restricted you are, or I guess maybe you don't even realize it, but if you constantly go off the deep end when you vacation or when you holiday or something comes around, and you don't know how you got there, it's probably because the approach you're using isn't that sustainable. You need a vacation from your diet.
Yeah, so like the everyday is so restraintful that you need that big giant release, is what you're saying?
Exactly. It's kind of like how, I mean, this is something that it's the whole reason why we use diet breaks. It's the whole part of the reason why we use refeeds. And it's the whole rationale for flexible dieting and having some limit on things like, borrowing calories from one day, or some limit on something like if it fits your macros, because sometimes the solution prompts the problem where you think, oh, I need these big refeeds. It's like, well, you need the big refeed because you've been over dieting on all the other days, It's the same reason why we see typically not as bad binges and post-comp rebounds in people who take a more flexible approach compared to someone who takes a very rigid approach, even if they got to the same level of leanness and had the same calories, So.
Okay. So tactically, so if that's the whole, like, okay, your philosophy of like how you approach this thing, tactically, what are things for someone who doesn't want to count every meal or maybe doesn't know how yet? What are easy things that they could do while away to limit disasters?
For sure. Well, yeah. So philosophically, as soon as the cuisine experience stops becoming the purpose of the vacation, then you can start to act tactically, right? And I think the first one is just to realize that even if you make big fancy meals at home, they're almost never going to be the same amount of calories as eating out. So it's very intelligent to beforehand make sure that you get a hotel room that has cooking stuff available, fridge, and that one of your first stops when you get into your place is the grocery store rather than just eating at a restaurant every single meal. Also, this actually allows you to see more stuff. Like if you pack lunches and then just eat dinner and, or something like that, or you enjoy, like breakfasts are also if there's any meal that's relatively easy to consume a reasonable number of calories when you're eating out, it's breakfast. You can always get like eggs on toast almost anywhere, and limit the amount of calories you're eating, or just get, coffee and an egg white omelet, or, it really depends on how much you need to cut calories. But if you pack lunches and just eat dinner and breakfast and keep breakfast light and short so that you can go about and do your day, then you really only have to make a good decision once. Because from psychology, we know that the more opportunities you have to make a bad decision, that's really what results in a lack of success. And people who have really, really good willpower, quote unquote, it's not actually about them having incredible strength of will. It's they're good at managing their environment.
Yeah. And what's funny is, like, I'm the opposite in a weird, like a hack for me when I'm not like tracking every fucking thing is that I know I now and always love a big breakfast. I eat ginormous. Compared to the rest of my day, that's the biggest meal. And if I was like, well, I'm out of town, I want to eat this big fancy dinner and I didn't eat much during the day, I would eat way more at that big fancy dinner than if I had the giant breakfast I always have, because that's normal for me.
Mm-hmm.
Is that also true if you were dieting on vacation?
I would try to train after breakfast, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So it does depend. If you are a competitive athlete in the midst of needing to eat a lot, but needing to also be strategic about where you place that food because your performance does depend on that. Unlike powerlifters and bodybuilders, then yeah, you do have
and
to
a good point too, right, is right now in my life, last couple of years, I don't like going to bed extremely full. So I eat dinner early, right? That might be different for someone. Like I know Bert's biggest meal typically is his dinner when he trains at night after he works out. So I think maybe that's a good place to start, right? Is like normal, as close to normal as you can get to your habits might make all of it a lot easier. Right? So just noticing your day-to-day before you go is better than messing up a diet because you tried all these weird things.
Yeah, a little bit of planning beforehand can go a long way. Like most people listening to this podcast, they like lifting. So when they go on vacation, taking a vacation from lifting is stressful, not helpful.
Yeah.
Like I personally, I typically shift to a minimalistic full body. Maybe I can get it in 2 to 3 times a week approach when I'm traveling, and I periodize it. So it either falls on a deload or it falls on a period where that's not an error in my overall big picture planning if that occurs. Which I would advise, but also making sure that I have access to a gym that caters to my needs. And for a lot of the barbell athletes or people who use the barbell movements who listen to our podcast, that's really one big upside of CrossFit, is that there's a box with pretty good equipment, or at the very least a squat rack and barbells that you can get access to almost everywhere now.
Yeah.
So find your local CrossFit box, find your local grocery store, and get a hotel room equipped with a kitchenette, and you will be in a much better position to make decisions that are align with your goals.
Yeah. And then tactically too, like large amount of protein anywhere you can get before anything else.
I like to bring my own protein, to be honest, because sometimes it's very hard to find protein that is lean. It comes attached with other delicious macronutrients.
Yeah. As y'all know, I travel with immense amounts of jerky and Quest bars everywhere I go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think,
and y'all steal them, Berto, all the time.
I think it's also, if you have a time restricted high difficulty goal like contest prep, you do need to basically ensure that you're still losing fat during that phase and not getting off track. You don't want to get behind the 8 ball. Yeah. If your goal is to diet with not necessarily a specifically determined amount of time, or perhaps you've created an arbitrary deadline to keep yourself accountable, but it does have some flex to it if something like a unplanned vacation comes up, then it might be a much more reasonable goal and more useful strategy to simply not backpedal during your vacation and treat it as a diet break. Yeah. And that's when maybe you focus a lot more on eating behavior rather than finding ways to roughly track calories. So doing things like you guys are talking about, bringing a lot of protein, eating a salad while you dip your fork in the dressing completely before you move on to your main meal, or packing a lunch and eating a small breakfast and eating a large dinner, or flipping that if that's the way your normal habits are. All of those things now become important if you're going to just be like, right, I'm going to take a week off of dieting, but you just don't want to gain fat. Then you have a lot more flexibility and you can be less structured and rigid, but you still need to make good decisions.
Yeah, that's a damn good approach. If you don't have super duper solid macros, then it makes it a lot easier to plan your break around that vacation, because generally you know about them a little bit ahead of time when they're coming up.
Yep. Another thing, if you're not like trying to visit every single restaurant in that town, you end up being more physically active than you would be otherwise. You're down there in your feet, seeing this, seeing that. It's quite common that I will have someone come back from vacation, and maybe we had a diet break where the goal was not to lose fat during this week, just to, as Eric said, not backpedal, and we come back lighter just because they weren't a desk jockey for about a week or so. And then also like the cortisol levels, they chill out because they're having a good time on vacation, as it should be. So this kind of, when I hear everything we've gone over, it's like, oh yeah, I do that. Like, but how I got there, to be honest, is doing that. Like, I goofed up a few times, and the more practice you get, the more you start to develop these little quirky systems. Yeah. And now it's gone to the point where it's like I have my systems if I'm prepping. I have my systems if I'm not prepping and I don't have any immediate deadline. But one thing is for sure, just like when you went from I am like MacGyver in my own kitchen with my macronutrients to, oh shoot, I have to go to Outback Steakhouse and make this happen. What do I do? And maybe the first few times they weren't exactly textbook, but you learn from them, and then over time you master that skill. So you definitely have to get in there and try it a few times, I feel.
Yeah, that's a general good point, is like avoiding vacations because you're scared to gain weight is like the worst way to get better at it, because now you have no reps, right?
Yeah, and that is a lot of the reason behind some of the old school approaches, is that it is easier to prep when you socially isolate and don't do anything that normal people do. However, that comes at the cost of then having an unhealthy relationship with the sport long term, and even your family and yourself as you stunt your own growth outside of bodybuilding. But so yeah, I think you always have to just, not necessarily you can't use any of those tactics, you just have to be aware of it. There is a time to potentially close yourself off a little bit so that you have less decisions to make, so that you can't make poor ones. But be aware that you are doing it and know that this isn't a sustainable approach, instead of that being the entire strategy to dieting, which is kind of the old school approach.
Yeah. Before we move on to like the people who want abs and the actual preppers, before we move on to them, the one thing I want to close with that is a very direct thing with me and a couple of athletes in like the last 2 or 3 weeks, which is why it's on top of my brain, is them being like, they're younger athletes and being like, well, but my family was in town, or my parents don't buy that food that makes it easy for me, you know? Just the idea, this goes with vacation too, but in their own homes, where they're like, oh, I had a whole family come in town and my mom bought all this stuff and it was just there staring at me kind of thing. Or the fact that, well, I want to do what everyone else on this 10-man trip wants to do and they like this kind of food. Do you have any advice for people who, and I know it'll be philosophical advice, who feel like that's a real big issue for themselves?
I've actually had a lot of people from, actually, it's not even one ethnic background. There's a lot of different ethnic backgrounds where eating is very important. And when family comes, like a gift you give to your mother, your grandmother, you eat the food they give you. And being a American white guy with, you know, no siblings and not having really close connections and a deep family, that was actually one area I wasn't very good at coaching. So I'd be like, just eat what you want. And they're like, I can't do that, bro. Like,
yeah, you're like, just tell your grandma no. And they're like, no, she'll kill me. Like, she will kick me out. Yeah.
So, I think that has always been, that's something that, it's cross-cultural. Obviously not into my unique cultural experience, but
white kids don't have
I think a big one is you still do know when it's coming, typically. Right.
Right.
So don't set yourself impossible standards, because it's a lose-lose. Either you will try to follow it and won't be able to, and you'll beat yourself up, or you'll be like, damn it, I'm just going to follow my diet and everyone else be damned, and you're going to not have a good experience with your family. So that's typically a great time for a diet break, and then just finding some way so that if you know when the family meals are going to be, then you limit your intake the rest of the day so that you can kind of do your thing there to whatever standard Italian or Mexican or Russian grandmother is going to feed you, you know? So.
Yeah. Well, and I think another thing too is to make sure, like we said, that you're not counting on that. Well, they said I could have my one family meal because it's not rude, and then eating like 3 pieces of pie kind of thing, where it's like, that is your responsibility to like not be in the starved state to where this delicious food that grandma and abuela brought you is not so mouth-watering at this point because you starved yourself all day for this thing. So like you said, it just goes back to responsibility, I guess, right? And not blaming others.
Here's like the difference between me and like my grandmother is that like I can see her big bowl of pozole and I can give it a ballpark identity in regards to calories.
Yeah.
And I can go to like my little tier system and be like, you know what? I probably won't make my protein today. I'm probably just going to have to ballpark my calories, but I'm gonna find a way to not eat 5,000 today. I'll eat my 3,000 calories and I'll be okay. And I think that's the one thing that people forget about flexible dieting is that there's an educational component to that. It's not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
But you know, you take a bowl of pozole like down the street and have everyone like try to guess how many calories in there. You're going to hear the weirdest things, 200 calories, things like that. Whereas someone who has a good variety in their food choices and they've been doing this for a while, they're going to be okay. One thing I like to tell people about like these sort of meals is the whole law of diminishing returns, that essentially your first bite is your best bite. And then after that, it's not quite as tasty. So remember that as you're having that thing that your mom makes once a year that's freaking tasty, because it does get to the point where it just kind of becomes mindless eating as opposed to, that first one that you're like, I've been waiting since November for this, right? So yeah, don't expect perfection. That's huge. That's huge.
Yeah, Berto pointed out a really good thing there is just kind of how harmful the idea of me trying to be optimal at all times can be. What he's talking about is making the best decision given the situation, which is really what the root of flexible dieting is, rather than going, right, here is, my standard. I can't meet it in this situation, and that is going to create me stress. It's like, no, you have to just let go of it immediately, move on to the next, what is possible in this situation, Yeah. And sometimes it even means, right, I'm not going to be a deficit today.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to shoot a quick text message to my coach and just say, hey, so, we knew this week was going to be the family visiting, and we were going to try to just use, tier 1 and just hit calories. Today I'm going to be at 100 calorie surplus, and I'm halfway through the week. So what do you want me to do with Friday, Saturday, and Sunday? And you make a call based on that situation, rather than beating yourself up for not meeting what you thought would be optimal.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So if we were now to shift to, I guess, taking those principles all in mind, right, and building upon them, because it's not like we forget any of that shit when we have even stricter goals. Let's say that someone is either actually a competitor and they're just kind of in the off season. Maybe they don't actually, maybe they are cutting, or maybe they're just needing to keep their abs because they photo shoot next month. I don't know what it is, but they don't necessarily have to get on stage, but they do need to be super aware. What would be the next level of philosophy?
The approach there?
Yeah. I guess philosophically, what would be the next mind ninja trick to wrap around on that?
I have a good answer for that, because I think what typically happens is the competitor will want to dot every I and cross every T, and if there's even a chance they think they could, they will try. And I actually don't think that's a good approach, because you really just can't always predict that when you're outside of your normal environment. So I just start with the philosophy of drop the pebbles immediately. So when we set the standard, I tell them, right, this week we're just going for protein and calories. And they're like, I think I can try. I'm like, no, I don't want you to. That's not the goal. We're just going to do protein and calories. We are going to lower the standard to something we know we can consistently hit. And don't worry about when your refeeds are placed. I know we've got a 48-hour one. Let's just get 2 refeeds wherever they fall, and you can borrow. And tier 2 is the highest standard we're going to go, right from the start. So it's just immediately the process of just focusing on the big rocks. And even when you think you might be able to dot more I's and cross more T's, you just don't even try, because then it's you can set yourself up for failure.
Yeah, that's what prime example of that would be what I do with my coach now. When I was when I only was doing typical bodybuilding. That's bodybuilding and powerlifting put together, just so y'all know.
Oh, bodybuilding. way better than power building. Yeah.
But when I was doing that, it was a lot easier because everyone in my life does that. So we'd go to any goals and I'd be fine, right? But now I have all this weird shit that has to go on. So when we tried my first vacation with Coach and I, where he programmed, and I went to Gold in Sacramento with Brandon, and I was like, I can't do anything, and I felt like such a failure, and I dreaded reporting to my coach, I did 50% of what you did, and then instead of this, I did this other thing, and and whereas by the time we went to London last year, our protocol is now we don't program anything, and you let me know what you got done, and I feel so much better because anything I do now is a win, and we got 2 workouts, and I did not even half of what I normally do, but I still didn't feel like a piece of shit because I wasn't not doing what I was supposed to do. I was rather anything I did was better than nothing kind of thing.
Yeah, it goes right with training too. I kind of look at, all right, first, can I get all my volume done? And probably the answer is sometimes it's yes, and I have to just change my frequency. But at this stage of my development, it's often no. I can't get 5 days of training into a 1-week vacation.
Yeah.
So then it becomes, okay, what can I do to make sure I don't regress at all? Not that you're really going to significantly in a week, but I go, right, can I get 2 full body sessions in without training isolation movements? And that often is I can find an hour and a half in my whole freaking, vacation, and just go hard for the period I have and enjoy it, and then get back to the vacation.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then, like you said, dropping isolations. Another one too with me, it's not just the time away, it's that I don't feel as good on those training sessions, so I won't attempt higher intensity sessions. I'll volume match it lower if I need to.
Yeah, it's not going to go well anyway. That's a very good point. The equipment feels weird. You might be jet lagged depending on how far you traveled. You may or may not have gotten good sleep. So if you are someone who seems to depend on what you eat around training, that's probably going to be different. And you're going to be distracted. So it's, ideally, I sometimes have people tell me their vacation schedule in advance so I can put a deload there. And then when it comes around, I go, look, I know you have a 4-day session per week deload here. But if you train twice, that's fine. It's a deload. It doesn't matter, So don't even worry about it. Even if you took a full week off from training on a deload week, that would still fit in with the overall goal of our training macro cycle,
Yeah. And I think what you said, a little bit ago too, that is really useful and like good for just me, not including my athletes, but yes, including them, I guess too, but it's just a week. Like, it's not like you're vacationing for a month typically. It's like if we're going 2 to 7 days, you really, unless you binge your face off, and then not that much can go that wrong that's not reversible, especially for someone who, like we said, just doesn't want to get fat or wants to get their like summer bod in check. Like, not training for a whole week isn't ideal, but it's not like gonna kill you. I don't know, just that reminding myself and my athletes all the time, like, we have a feedback loop of a week. Not that much can go, like, you're not going to get perfect, and you're not going to atrophy to shit in 1 week. So, like, it's all going to be okay. That was hard for me for a long time. But, anyways. Did you freeze again, Eric?
No, he is holding.
No, he's frozen
still.
for sure.
Okay, but he can hear us. There he goes. He's back. Okay. He's back. Eric, you're back, right?
You guys there?
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
All right.
Hey,
how you doing?
We saw you checking the Facebook.
I was trying to figure out if it was my Wi-Fi or what. Anyway, go ahead.
I think, especially if we're talking about contest prep, what I would advise people to do is to be strategic about where they place their vacation and avoid a lot of this stuff altogether. Your experience will be greatly enhanced if you do just that. This year, actually, we were supposed to go, me and Leanna, to a few places in Southeast Asia, and possibly, like, we're considering, like, hey, we'll stop and see Eric too. And I'm like, no, that's going to suck. I'm going to be like 3 months into prep. Maybe we should wait until afterwards, because, we're just going to have more energy to just, not just like train and eat, but like do things and like want to like see all of Japan and things like that. So I think the first thing you can do is avoid it if possible.
That's a good point.
And I think just avoiding the issue altogether. And then we talked about it, if possible, give yourself like a month or two post prep to kind of cleanse out all the how high you have food on your to-do list. And again, all that stuff is just going to enhance your vacation. I was really tempted to try to pull it off, more so as just as a challenge to myself. Like, I got this. We're going to spend 3 weeks on that side of the world, and I'm going to come back with, making all sorts of progress. And then I stopped and thought about it. I'm like, no, why don't you just avoid this whole fiasco and save it for a better time?
Yeah, and that's one I get that a lot, because bodybuilders love to self-challenge. And I even had a competitor who I had spent a lot of time talking out of doing a contest prep and getting married in the middle of it and trying to do his honeymoon. Mm-hmm. And he was like, well, I think it'd be a challenge. I think I can do it. And I was like, hold on, listen. Personal challenges are fine when the consequences only affect you. Mm. But when the consequences are the people you go to visit and your new wife are going to have to deal with your crazy ass when you fail, even if it's a small percentage chance, that isn't just your decision to make for yourself. So you have to think about that too. Like, you might be able to pull it off, but if you don't, it's not just your ass on the line in those situations. And I totally agree with Berto. Like, the way we preach contest prep, ideally, if you're competing like every other year max, so take a vacation when you're not prepping, and probably not right after you prep if you're a novice competitor. Experienced competitors I've seen do just fine, and it fits nicely with the recovery diet, so long as they can have some level of self-restraint, so that it doesn't turn into the recovery binge, So
the recovery binge. We should make a 30-minute video about that.
Eat everything. Thank you for watching 3D
And that's Eric's face for the next 29 minutes and 40 seconds. Okay, so we kind of went into prep anyways, and I think we would hope, though, that someone, I guess with us, right, if our prep versus someone who is just trying to clean it up is, it is different, and we've talked about it a little bit, but it doesn't have to be like a mini cut because it is shorter. At sometimes you're like, maybe that should be even more intense than a prep, like more. Like, why would you vacation in the middle of a mini cut if it's like 4 weeks, bro? Like, just stay home and do your thing. So it's I don't know. I think I just want to talk a little about how the gray area between I'm competing in 4 weeks versus my show is in 8 months. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like how you do. Yeah. There is a difference in the way that you handle weekends, events, eating out, like.
I've had my slightly more experienced, even not necessarily novice, but like, I've done a show or two competitors successfully do a 1 week diet or 1 week vacation at the beginning of their diet.
Yeah.
If they've got like 30 weeks, because the whole reason you don't want to do it at the end is because you are totally starving, and that shouldn't be the case early on in the diet.
Yeah.
And if, we're doing our jobs right, or if you're dieting yourself, if you're doing it right, it should be easy for probably the first half at least, Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't see necessarily a problem there. Then it just becomes tactics. You just have to make good decisions and plan and set yourself up to be able to hit those big rock targets during that week or 2 weeks that came in week 6 out of 30. That shouldn't be an issue. You just have to be have a little bit of self-discipline to plan beforehand.
Okay. I think if y'all are okay with it, I'm ready to get into the fun part of like, all right, you are less than 6 weeks from your show. Work sent you somewhere for 5 days. How do we do this kind of thing?
Quit your job.
Yep.
So now you're homeless, and protein's expensive, so I don't know what you're going to do.
You sleep on your trophy that you got.
So let's say philosophically we are trying to be as close to optimal as possible, right? So training-wise, what would we need to do to make that happen? Eric, you already said, you're like, find the gym. CrossFit gyms are a great way if you have barbell movements. I'm hoping work didn't send you to some place that doesn't even have a corporate gym, but...
let's start with the worst case scenario, because if you can deal with that, you can deal with everything else after it. I actually have had this happen to people. I had a client who was a salesman who got sent to do shit that he didn't expect, and there was a vacation where we did clapping push-ups, just because it was a way to ensure he was putting out maximal force to get a good pushing movement there.
Okay.
This is gonna sound funny. He literally went down to like the hotel area and bought some gloves so that he could open his door and do chin-ups along the door, because there was no hotel gym. Because if you just put your hands on top of a wooden door, it just cuts the shit out of it. Yeah. And then did pistol squats. And that was it. And we did that every other day, 3 sets to failure. Period.
Word. That is impressive.
We got a push, we got a pull, we got a leg movement with a squat. I mean, it's about all we could do in that situation. It was in the middle of nowhere. And then he had a very limited diet. I'm sure his digestive tract was not happy with him. But, there's still a grocery store everywhere, and he made that happen. And then he didn't have a fridge, so he just had to get non-perishables, so rice cakes, tuna packets.
What a champ.
All the fun stuff.
What a champ.
He was a champ. Yeah. He got it done. Beef jerky. I had to tell him, just don't get on the scale anymore.
Because of all the sodium?
He brought the scale, and I was like, that's not going to be useful. Like, use your food scale. Don't worry about the scale. You just hit your macros for the week, and we'll be on point. Because if you're going to be eating 60 grams of protein from beef jerky, you're going to weigh like 3 pounds heavier. You know? So, yeah.
I love the jerkies. Okay. So if you have any agency over where you stay, I don't think we need to keep going on. Try to be by a gym you can use. Try to have a microwave. Try to have a fridge. Try to go to a grocery store. Okay, all that said, tactically, what are some things that we should be doing differently? Like me, one of my things in prep is always to eat on the way to any type of dinner I had to go to. So if I know when I go there I'm going to have to order grilled chicken and broccoli, but I'm starving, I'll eat carrots and jerky on the way.
Mm-hmm.
half the time, or like pork rinds. Bert knows I would take, even if I wanted a salad and I'm like, I can't get the croutons, but I can bring pork rinds in my purse and smash them on my salad, and then I have good fats, and I'm okay. Just kidding, not good fats, but like then it's just protein and fat versus the carb, and so packing, I guess, in general.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in a situation where you're not trying to see what you can do without gaining weight, which is a lot of people on vacation, and what we were talking about earlier, if you're trying to be on point, and let's say you're in a situation where you don't have control over your food, a lot of restaurants you can make something work. Like if you're at any kind of steakhouse or like kind of typical American chain restaurant, you can order a chicken breast, plain grilled or baked, and a side of broccoli not cooked in butter. And you're good to go. Like even if you totally miscalculate, how off can you be,
Yeah.
And then you can just play cleanup when you get home with your own food if you have it.
Yeah.
So
the general rule would be, as, and not that we freaking preach clean eating, but as clean as possible from how it was made is the easiest way to account for stuff, right? As unprocessed as possible, as close to how it grew as possible, no sauces if possible. Well, and if they come with them and it's not crazy, you can get it on the side. Like you said, to just dunk instead of pour. Protein,
it's just a matter.
vegetable.
It's just a strategy to minimize error. Like let's say you're really terrible at tracking and you're going to be off by 30%. 30% of a pasta dish is potentially 800 calories. 30% of broccoli and chicken is like 150 at most. So so you'll be fine. It's just a matter of making a decision that can't screw you up, rather than just hoping you tracked it right and that they didn't sneak something in.
And it's just in general easier to have, like, I would say, single macro foods. Like, it's almost completely protein. It's almost completely carbohydrates, so that you know exactly, like you said, to minimize error. Packing, good choices. What else would be, like, extreme? Not extreme, but, like, prep ready. That's different.
It's the big stuff. I bring protein powder and know it's a myth. You won't get stopped at the at customs and get interrogated because I think you have brown cocaine.
I got in trouble for creatine. I got pulled over for creatine once, out of the line.
Creatine is a little different. It's a white powder, and if you have it in baggies and not the original container. But I've gone through many times. I just bring the actual container if it's something like creatine or a pre-workout because it's typically small. You can fit it in somewhere. But protein's harder. You're not going to bring a 5-pound tub of protein with you. But if you have it in some other container and you can normally convince them, it's not a big deal. So.
I saw Jeff, actually, this was last time he competed. We were in the Dominican Republic, and he basically, I think he ate out 3 times a day for nearly a week. And during that week, he actually got better. And a lot of it, obviously Jeff's been doing this for a while. A lot of the things that we have recommended is exactly what he did. This is my protein, my lean protein. These are my steamed veggies. And then along with the fact that we were just way more active than we typically are back home,
especially
he came out okay. Yeah, and he was actually less than a month out from Worlds, like WNBF
awesome.
Worlds. So it can get to that point where you can be that pliable and that effective, almost regardless of whatever your environment looks like. And to me, that is hardcore. Like the dude that stays at home, for his best friend's birthday party because he's 3 weeks out. Like, dude, like that's the cowardly way of going about it. Jeff was like out there and like shaking hands, kissing babies, hitting macros, and he came back cleaner, dude. So,
but it does take skill to develop that.
Yeah.
It does take time. I can do that now, but I couldn't have 7 years ago.
Yeah. My first prep, and I don't regret it too because I don't think I knew any different, and it was just easier.
Mm-hmm.
I just would go places and not eat, and it wasn't that big of a deal. It really wasn't. Like, I'd go to the bar and order a water. Or if there was like a cocktail hour or whatever, I just would drink my water on the sides or get a Diet Coke. Like, you think everyone cares, but they really don't. Like, unless it's a sit-down dinner which I realize has to happen on occasion, but there's a lot of like social things that don't require you to eat. There's just food there. And it seems like a big deal to you because you're either self-conscious or because you're feeling hunger or whatever, but I would, again, eat on the way and just drink something while I was there, and nobody gives a shit. It could be Everclear for all they know. I could be that hardcore. I don't know.
You heard it here. Don't eat or drink food on vacation.
But you know what I mean? Like, people are like, yeah, like it's different than grandma made me this dish where it's like there's a happy hour to network, and it's like nobody cares if you're drinking really or eating.
No, no one gives a shit in that situation. Like that's the times, most of the time when I see one of us dieting on vacation, it's like we have a work thing. Like we have to go to a different country and present on 3DMJ stuff. That typically, it's easy. I've seen Jeff, myself, and a few others diet during those periods. It's not a big deal.
Oh.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other closing statements, arguments, points to get at before? I think we did really good in like 40-something minutes.
Yeah.
Word.
Yeah.
All right, so just have fun and drink Everclear.
Correct. Don't eat or drink anything for your entire vacation.
Make that a square. Make that a square. Make the Everclear thing a square.
All right, talk to you next week.